Hello there, I hope that you are doing well. Welcome to this new lecture. As you have all probably already noticed, the current word on the street, the one stock that everyone is speaking about is SpaceX. On Friday, SpaceX had its IPO, resulting in the biggest IPO in history ever. Over the course of the days leading up to the IPO, a lot of friends of mine and a lot of family members and a lot of students reached out to me to hear my thoughts on this IPO, and hence why I decided to create this lecture for you. Before we dive into this lecture, I want you to understand that this IPO isn't just important due to the fact that it's the biggest IPO in history. It's really important because of the fact that this IPO has a huge influence on the US markets. And therefore we're going to be looking throughout this lecture at the SpaceX stocks, and next that how it's going to influence Nasdaq in particular heading into the upcoming weeks to follow. First of all, we're going to be looking at this CNBC news article, the SpaceX IPO takeaways. As you can see, on the first day of trading, the stock closed at $161, jumping over 90% after a record debut. When we take a look at the SpaceX chart, what I want you to see is that the stock opened up around $149 right here, with an all-time high being set at $176, and the stock eventually closed around $160. First of all, I want you to notice that this right here is huge volatility which is taking place on this stock, in particular on the IPO day, as to be expected. But what I want you to understand is the following. When we pay attention to an IPO, to a new stock which is getting listed, I want you to understand that there isn't any historical price action which you can refer to. There isn't any price action in the past which we can apply or time cycles to actually recognize, okay, these are key liquidity pools to monitor or anything along those lines. But still, there are a lot of algorithmic signatures in the intraday delivery taking place. So I want you to think about that for a moment. How would that be possible? Well, what I want you to understand is that the only way that we are able to look at a stock like this, which has just got IPO'd, wants to understand that we pay attention to the price axis. When we pay attention to the price axis and we zoom out, what I want you to see is that the following levels are going to be important to monitor for SpaceX. What you can see is that we opened up around 150 right here. What I'm doing is I'm paying attention to the 50 points in between the levels, as you can see. Meaning the following levels are going to be monitored by me heading into the upcoming weeks. Right now it's too soon to say what's going to follow in the days to come. However, as the trading days are going to take place as we open up for the next week, I want you to start paying attention to how price is going to react around this 150 price level right here. As long as SpaceX manages to stay above this level right here, and we begin to see the signs of a buy program continuing to take place, from there on I anticipate that we're likely going to be climbing towards $200 a share right here. And if we get to that level, what I'm going to be monitoring is how we're going to react of that. Now, what I want you to understand is that what I'm outlining to you here is a very simple way to look at the chart through the lens of there being no previous price action yet. What I do is I pay attention to key price levels from which I'm going to be monitoring the reactions to determine what is likely going to be happening next. All in all, personally, I do not have any interest in buying this stock at this current price. And the reason being is because what I want you to understand is that every single person out there is looking at SpaceX right now and they're thinking to themselves, this is going to continue running forever. It is going to continue to moon. It's going to continue to rise. And I'm not saying it can't. I'm not saying it can't be repriced higher very aggressively in the weeks to come. But I want you to be aware of the following. Right now, price is already trading in a deep premium considering the amount of hype which there is around this stock. Secondly, what I want you to be aware of is that when you investigate how the actual shares are distributed between the public shares which have become available and what is being held by insiders, you are going to be seeing something very interesting and concerning there. And that is why I decided to create this lecture for you. Now, since SpaceX has IPO'd, it has already been listed on the Nasdaq, of course. And because it has taken place, we are going to be paying attention to the Nasdaq to actually anticipate what SpaceX SpaceX is likely going to be doing heading into the weeks to come. Because when we pay attention to the daily time frame of Nasdaq, what I want you to see is the following. Ever since we opened up for the second quarter, we saw the market literally reprice vertical. We saw a huge repricing higher taking place where Nasdaq rose more than 30% throughout this repricing higher. Notice that when we opened up for June, however, we saw the market open up, run higher and reprice towards the downside very quickly. This right here was a market maker sell model which took place. Now when we pay attention to this delivery, what I want you to notice first of all is the following. What I want you to notice is that when it comes to this whole delivery where we repriced higher very aggressively and repriced lower very aggressively right here, what I want you to actually see is that we repriced below these lows in particular. What I'm about to do is I'm about to add some lipstick to the chart and I want you to start paying attention to my annotations. Before I do so, I want you to just pause the lecture for a moment and I want you to try and think about the following. What is actually taking place within the Nasdaq right now? And when you consider the SpaceX IPO, you should be able to understand, aha, this is how they're likely going to be using this IPO heading into the third quarter. We're right now near the end of the second quarter of 2026. The IPO is taking place of SpaceX, biggest IPO ever to take place, not just on the Nasdaq, no, across the whole world. And because it has taken place, I want you to understand that that right there is a perfect event to utilize for what? It's a perfect event to utilize for manipulation purposes by smart money. Hence why heading into the upcoming weeks, I'm going to be paying close attention to what is going to happen to the SpaceX stock as a whole and what Nasdaq is doing in the meantime. Because when it comes to the higher time frame analysis of Nasdaq, what I want you to see is that price has been in the sell program ever since we opened up for June. We opened up, ran up higher, repriced lower very aggressively into these old imbalances right here, and we then saw the market reprice higher leading up to the SpaceX IPO. When I add my lipstick to the chart, and I hope you paused the lecture, if you didn't yet, please pause it now, because I promise that if you just strain your eye to see the algorithmic signatures which I'm about to outline to you, you're going to be smiling. What I want you to see is that I've added my lipstick to the chart, my annotations so to say. What I want you to see is that what I've outlined is a lot of different drawings, but don't worry, I'm going to be outlining every single one in particular to you. What I want you to notice is that when it comes to what has happened on the Nasdaq in particular, is that we saw this huge repricing higher taking place, and when we opened up for May, we saw the market consolidate for a bit. We saw it go sideways right here. What I want you to understand is that what happened throughout this consolidation before we had this final repricing higher taking place with a lot of speed and velocity is that sell-side liquidity was being engineered below these lows right here. Notice that sell-side liquidity was being engineered in advance of this sequence of imbalances. And the reason why this is important to monitor is because of the following. What I want you to understand is that this sell-side liquidity, this consolidation, is the original consolidation within the market maker sell model. We saw the market reprice higher. This is the buy side of the curve. Everyone was being trapped into believing higher prices were imminent and likely going to continue forever on the Nasdaq. Everyone was chasing the market long, but when June opened up, I outlined within the matrix unlocked, okay guys, June open high is the only scenario which I deem likely for the weeks to come. Reason being is because we were trading in a deep premium, wants to understand that the right time was near for an open high to occur. So when June opened up, which is outlined by this monthly open line right here, we opened up, repriced higher for a few days, and then on this Wednesday right here, we formed a swing high and the market repriced lower very aggressively. So what you can see is that what happened is that we saw buy side delivery after we consolidated for a bit, engineering sell side liquidity below these lows, and then we saw this large sell side liquidity being drawn towards throughout this sell side of the curve. Notice that this repricing hour was very quick. We see a CB get created right here, a bearish value gap. Market retraces into that CB throughout this current week. Notice that we just step into it, this institutional order flow entry drill taking place, I of that, and we then see the market expand towards the downside very quickly. Trading into what? Trading into this engineered sell side liquidity, completing this market maker sell model. The market maker sell model looks like the following: buy side of the curve, sell side of the curve. It's a perfect triangle when you look at it from that perspective. What I want you to see is that the market reprices into this sequence of imbalances right here, and notice that we trade into it multiple times. Multiple days the market was trading inside of this sequence of imbalances. Now what I want you to notice is that we formed relative weak lows right here, and the market expanded higher, trading back into this daily CB on the day of the SpaceX IPO. Now what I'm going to be monitoring in particular heading into the week to come is the following. What I want you to notice is that I've outlined this buy side liquidity pool in particular. The moment that we open up on Sunday, what will be important to monitor is the reaction to this high. Reason being is because of the following. Notice that this high was the high which set up the repricing into the sell side liquidity pool of the low of the market maker sell model and into the sequence of imbalances right here. Notice that this high is what? When we open up for Sunday, this becomes our previous week high, guys. When we open up, the reaction to this high is going to be important because it's going to be the previous weekly high as we open up for a new week. And as you know, a previous weekly high is always going to be a key level to monitor the reaction to. That isn't just any high. What I want you to see is that the high formed inside of this CB. And when we look at the left side of the curve, this buy side of the curve, do you see how we had this imbalance right here? And how in this imbalance, we saw this low formation taking place. If you watched my recent lecture on the Zuzi market structure shift pattern, you will see that this is the exact algorithmic signature which I taught you within that lecture, which I've been using for years now to confirm market reversals. Hence why the previous week I was so bearish on Nasdaq, because this old sequence of imbalances right here was the drawing liquidity for the week to come. We had a daily Zuzi market structure shift pattern right here. We tap into the CB, which got created as we displaced below the low, which formed inside of this bullish value gap on the left side of the curve. And we saw the market beautifully reprice towards the downside. Now, hence why heading into next week, the reaction to this high is going to be so important. If Nasdaq manages to take out this high, what I'm going to be paying close attention to is whether or not we're going to see ES and Dow Jones also take out their respective previous week's highs. If they do, and we see Nasdaq manage to displace above this bearish value gap, this CB, and begin using it as support and price, well, then I can anticipate only one thing, and that is that we're likely going to be seeing the market draw towards the previous week's high on my chart right here. Reason being is because this high right here is the high which set up what? Which set up this repricing lower. That means that sellers have been making money ever since. So it means that the liquidity is on upside. But here comes a very important thing to be aware of. When you look at Q2 as a whole, and you look at where we opened up for this second quarter, we are in a deep premium relative to that second quarter's open. So what it means is that if we do not see the indices begin displacing higher, and we would actually see a rejection taking place of this high if we open up for the next week, what that would mean is the following. What it would mean is that we're likely going to be seeing what? A further continuation towards the downside. Yep, you heard me right. And the reason why I say so is because what I want you to understand is that when it comes to this whole repricing lower which took place, if we see the signs of a new high formation taking place inside of that same CB, which displays through this low, which displays through this BC, what that would signal is a new market maker sell model being set up. And that is why this range in particular of this bearish value gap, this red shaded box, is going to be so important to monitor. Now, I just gave you literally the game plan which I'm going to be monitoring heading into the upcoming week. This is not me giving you any financial advice. This is not me telling you to buy or sell the markets. It's just me sharing with you my opinion on what I'm going to be looking for heading into the upcoming week. But what is important to note is that the reaction to this daily CB is literally going to tell the full story heading into the upcoming weeks until the end of June. Reason being is because if we form a new high inside of the CB and we indeed see the signs of a sell program continuing to take place, well then we're likely going to be drawing towards these relative weak lows. But if we would instead see the market displace above this CB and considering the SpaceX IPO which has just taken place, where there's a lot of hype for the market to be repriced somewhere, which is on the upside in terms of what the public perception is, then we could actually see the market begin grinding towards what? The current June high, which is right here. And if that is the case, then the July open will be very important to monitor. Why? Because it's going to be the open of the third quarter. And if that opens high and we see the Q2 high be taken out, man oh man, that will be very interesting to monitor. But that's for down the line. For now, heading into the upcoming week, the reaction to this day's CB will literally tell the story, and that right there is what is going to be monitored. Now, how does this actually influence the SpaceX IPO, you might be wondering? Because I want you to understand the following. Because there has been such a big media push towards this IPO, where people that aren't even traders or investors came up to me asking me about whether or not they should open up an account and purchase this SpaceX stock, etc. That showed to me, okay, there's a lot of hype built around this. Yes, biggest IPO ever, it makes sense. But it also makes sense for them to run with this actively. Because when you look at all of the delivery which has taken place throughout this second quarter, where we repriced higher so violently, who do you think has been making money all throughout the second quarter? Buyers. So where's the majority of the sell side liquidity actually resting? Below all of these lows right here. So when it comes to what to be looking for heading into the weeks to come, we're trading in deep premiums, and that is what I want you to be aware of. Now, when we pay attention to ES then, what I want you to see on ES is that ES looks very similar to Nasdaq in terms of the way that this market has been delivered over the course of these past few months. Where ever since the second quarter that's open, we saw the market literally reprice towards the upside vertically, repricing higher, all the way from about 6,300 all the way to about 7,600 before we eventually saw the market begin showing any weakness which was significant. Market engineered sales liquidity below these lows right here, repriced higher and eventually formed a swing high before it began repricing towards the downside very aggressively. This right here is a market make a sell model, as you can see. What did the market reprice into? It repriced into this sequence of imbalances right here before we eventually formed a swing low and the market began repricing higher right here. Now, what I want you to be aware of is that when I add my lipstick to this chart, you're going to be seeing how similar it is to my Nasdaq annotations. And the reason being is because of the following. What I want you to see is that ES did not reprice into this daily CB, which got created right here before the market slammed lower even more. Instead, the market closed, I would say, rather far away from it. Hence why I'm outlining to you, when we open up for this next week, pay close attention to whether or not both Nasdaq as ES are going to be taking out that previous week's high. If not, that becomes a potential weekly SMT to monitor. Now, what I want you to see is that when we pay attention to these lows right here, there's a daily SMT which got engineered, a Kraken correlation on these lows right here, which set up this repricing higher, leading up to the SpaceX IPO on Friday. Now, what I want you to understand is that this Kraken correlation by itself does not mean, okay, new all-time highs are next. The reason being is because this daily SMT, which got engineered, can literally just be used for what? For repricing towards the nearest buy liquidity pool, take out liquidity which was engineered above this high, which I've outlined inside of that CB. And if we see a Kraken correlation there, that's going to be very important market data. And that is where I would not put a lot of significance on this Kraken correlation. The only moment that I would turn overly bullish on US markets right now is if we displace above this CB, same CB as on Nasdaq. If we displace above that bearish or value gap, only then I'll be looking for new all-time highs to take place. Reason being is again because we are in deep premiums, and that is why I want you to be cautious with constantly holding on to that idea of higher, 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 especially considering the fact that that SpaceX IPO has taken place. I understand that a lot of you might be thinking to yourself, oh, it is important to buy the stock right now because it's going to continuously run forever, etc. Like I mentioned, research how the shares have been distributed to the general public and to insiders. So with that being said, I want to thank you for watching this lecture all the way to the end. And there's one thing which I want you to be aware of, by the way. Do you see how the market repriced into the sequence of imbalances right here? We just repriced below it right here. And we then formed that low before the market expanded higher. When we take a look at Nasdaq again, do you see that Nasdaq actually found support inside of the sequence of imbalances right here? The moment that Nasdaq would reprice below the sequence of imbalances, only then I would be treating them as an inversion value gap also on ES. And that is something for you to investigate when it comes to a form of cracking correlations. Please let me know in the comments if you would like to see more lectures like these, where I'm actually discussing major news events with you and their importance on the US indices as a whole. Have a blessed Sunday, and I look forward to speaking to you soon again. Be safe.